Hey guys, so Dad wanted me to get on a video and record my entry into Boulder, and I was like, Dad, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but you know what, whatever. So I'm entering Boulder right now, and Holy Spirit's telling me to make this video about my time here in Boulder, and then show you guys some of the places that were significant while I was here. So a little bit of backstory. Boulder, Colorado is like, I've always called it the sanctuary, and it was way before I even got the call, for this purpose that will continue to reveal itself. But and I've lived in Colorado for like 25 years, since I was 14, and I'm almost 40 now. But I used to work for Kroger / King Soopers. I worked for them for 18 years, and while I worked for them, I had many opportunities to manage, to be like a manager, to oversee stores here in Boulder, as like an operations manager, or some kind of manager, like a coordinator or whatever. So I would visit the stores up here. And then in 2019 I became the store manager for the downtown Boulder store for King Soopers, the highest volume store here, one of the most difficult stores to manage in King Soopers because of the high volume. It's a small store. Customer count was about 5,000 a day, about 150 employees. We deal with like every single type of clientele, the rich, the famous, all the way down to the homeless community, because we're right down in downtown. And so I spent 2019 there, and you guys all remember what happened in 2020 with I'm not going to say the word, but it's the C word, because I was hearing some of the other messengers talk, and they're like, we can't say that word. So I'm going to say the C word, the jab in the arm, the pandemic that happened in March of 2020. I was managing the grocery store here in Boulder. So that's my, my like background on Boulder, when I was still living in the world. And then about, was it 2 years after God called me out of the world, and then he had me live as like a homeless person, he had me seek refuge here in Boulder. And so the first place that I'm gonna take you guys to is the shelter that I came to. So I lived at the shelter at the end of April of 2022. I got registered, and I lived at the shelter here in Boulder. And it was really interesting, because if you guys watched my other video, remember, I was, I ended up working for Walmart, making 6 figures, brand new cars every year, brand new house, big house, beautiful. I had everything that I could ever desire, right? And then for it to all be removed out of my life because I chose to, I didn't know exactly what I was choosing at the time. I just started making these decisions based on like what my soul was desiring, and then I wasn't even afraid. Like most of the time when I was going through my spiritual awakening, I'll just call it that, I wasn't even afraid. And like before I got to Boulder, like guys, there was some stuff, okay? Like there was some major stuff that I was having to go through and deal with, and it was all like a stripping, like after everything was removed out of my life, all the burdens, the money, the people, and the things. So first went the things, all my things. I left all my things behind. Then the people started to get removed out of my life, and then eventually the money was, I either God had me spend it somehow, like giving it to this and that person. And it wasn't a little bit of money, it was like thousands at a time. I had like $100,000 almost in the bank account. Maybe it was 100, it was like 80 something thousand, right? I'm exaggerating. And I had 2 cars. I had a brand new 2021 Dodge Challenger with, I think it was like the Scat Pack. It was like a really nice sports car. And then I also owned a Buick Encore outright. And so I was driving these vehicles, and then God had me, take the Challenger back because, well, it was a scary car. Honestly, it was so powerful. But eventually, everything was removed out of my life, and then I came up here and just lived as a homeless person because, and this is not a knock on my family, because anytime I do share my story about my past, I'm gonna end up talking about, how all the people got removed from my life, and my family pretty much like shunned me and shamed me and abandoned me. And but it wasn't, I don't blame them. I believe, and I know that God hardened, oops, my little dock thing fell, hardened their hearts towards me to push me pretty much out of the bird's nest. Because see, if they didn't do what they did, like not help me, when I had nowhere to go and nobody wanted me to live with them, and I was at odds with my parents because we just, didn't agree. No one agreed about the decisions I was making about why I didn't want to work for corporate anymore, why I didn't want my 6-figure salaries anymore. And I just couldn't explain to them well enough for them to understand that, it was a burden, and to live in the world and with all those expectations, and I just wanted something different, and no one understood because my life was so perfect on the outside. So when I talk about my family and how they pretty much abandoned me, and they'll say that it was my fault because I left them, but whatever, I'm not going to defend myself. That's something that I'm allowing God to sort out for me. I'm not gonna argue with anybody about that. But anyways, just want to clear that up, that I'm not upset with my family. I appreciate them, and I love them, and I'll always still be here for them as well. And I hope that we can all come together one day. And I think that's exactly what'll happen, with what I'm about to do. But right now, you see, I'm just gonna flip it. So this is downtown Boulder. This is Pearl Street Mall. I don't know if you can see that sign. I'm gonna, right there, that sign, Pearl Street. See all the people walking and stuff like that? That's Pearl Street Mall. So, but I'm on Broadway right now, and I'm just heading up to the shelter so I can kind of just give you guys a visual of where I initially came out, and I lived for maybe about a month or something. Yeah, it was about a month. And then, but what was so amazing, guys, was number one, I wasn't afraid, right? But God had sent, of course, he's always so way ahead of us. He paired me up with people to teach me how to live the homeless life and be successful at it, and not starve. And so I have a poem that I wrote, inspired by the Holy Spirit, of course, because I'm not a poet. But about how the homeless community they accepted me right away, and they opened up their camps to me, and they taught me, and they shared with me, and I shared with them, and we just became like instantly a community where, I pretty much, by the time I left this community, like living homelessly here, I knew everybody. And what I just want to talk about like one person. His name was Indigo, and his reputation was that he was like not the biggest, but I'm gonna say the biggest and baddest person out here, you don't mess with him. And but I met him once, and then I met him again, and then we just kind of like, he was this older gentleman, and he was Native American heritage. And but he just like kind of adopted me into his camp, and I would hang out with them, and then he would teach me like, hey, don't go hang out at that park over there, because that is where all of the meth addicts hang out, right? Things like that. And then he would be like, hey, if anybody messes with you, you let me know, and like, I have your back. But God, I had friends out here, like, they became my friends, and I wasn't afraid to be homeless. And I had a car, so I was able to get around. At that time I had a car, my Buick still. So I didn't give everybody rides. Like, there was probably only one person that I let in my car, and it was this girl that I had met at the shelter, and we became friends, and we hung out a little bit, and we went to church once together and things like that. And then that relationship was just a quick relationship, just to for a little season in time. And then after I was hanging out with her first, and then I started hanging out with Indigo and his group, and they would just tell me stories, and we would just sit around their camp. And honestly, okay, I would tell you, we were smoking some weed. I was still smoking weed at that time, 2 years ago, but like right shortly after. So I was hanging out with them in May, and then in June I quit smoking completely. God removed that burden off of my life, and so I stopped. I didn't need it, didn't have to do it anymore. And it's amazing how, like, when something isn't serving God's purpose anymore, or like, he will remove it, and it'll be easy, because I would smoke, and I'd be like, this is disgusting. Like, it just did not have the same effect on me. So then I was like, I just gave it up, like, it didn't even faze me. I didn't ever think about it again. Still don't ever think about it. Don't want it. But God also, I'll tell you guys, he had me start smoking cigarettes at the time because I needed to blend in. And then this was, remember I told you guys, I started my homeless journey in the end of April. Well, in March, while I was at Mission Beach, when I started, my initial training, God had me remove my beauty. He took that away for a short time, because look, I'm beautiful again. But he had me shave my head and stop wearing makeup. And I didn't know at that time exactly what it was for. And then he had me get like 3 tattoos. But it was to prepare me to live on the streets, right? Because I needed to blend in and look tough, so because I was just going to be a single Asian girl, living on the streets. Nobody else looked like me, I stood out instantly. But then I needed to look tough, so he had me shave my head and got two tattoos on my forearms, and then a tattoo on my shoulder, which were really beautiful. I like them. And just to like help me blend in. We're almost to the shelter, just like a minute away. But he really had everything planned out. And like, some of you guys who have had this same spiritual awakening where God starts to remove things from your life, and then starts to add things, and starts to have you do things that, on the outside it seems crazy. You're like, why would God have you shave your head? Like, no one believes me, but he was preparing me for the journey ahead, the journey that I didn't even know was ahead. Because, and you guys are gonna laugh, the ones that understand this, but if God told you when he was calling you out of the world, and he said, hey, here's where you're gonna end up, but I can't tell you much more than that. And if he told you the in between, what you're gonna have to like endure, suffer through, the trials and tribulations, no one would do this. No one would make that sacrifice. Nobody would give up their life, to go become homeless. Like, I was still prideful, and I had a big old ego and stuff like that, because of my status and stuff. And we're here at the shelter, so I'm about to show you guys. But God doesn't tell you all the in between, because I would be too afraid, you know, I'd be way too afraid. And I would never have been able to be here at this point in time, you know, 3 years later, from the time that I started making the changes. And then 2 years after my training began, nobody would do this. So thank you, Lord, for not telling me, because I would have been way too scared. Okay, we're here, so I'm gonna pull up and I'm just gonna show you guys. So I don't know if you guys can see this very well. Let me see. So there is the shelter. I'm gonna pull up so you guys can see the door. This is the entrance. Let me see if, are you guys able to see this? Sorry. This is like, my camera work kind of sucks, but see, there's the door. So we would, at about 4:30, we would start lining up at that door right there. And we would lay a blanket out, you know. Granted, it was like May, so it was like, it'd be so freaking hot, but you have to get in first. Women were guaranteed a spot, pretty much, right? But then you want to get in so that you can get a good bed. And I always ended up on the top bunk because, you know, I had no health issues and I wasn't like a heavy set girl or anything like that. So I always ended up on the top bunk. And then showers were, you know, shared bathroom, of course. And like, it was kind of gross, but I mean, they did the best they can at this shelter. And then they would feed you one hot meal at night. I think it was like Monday through Friday or something like that. One hot meal, that the volunteers would come in and serve us a meal. And it wasn't the best, guys. I mean, like, this is a shelter. So this is probably, because I've been to several shelters over the last couple of years. God really wanted to teach me how to live in a community like this. He was showing me a lot of different things. Like, number one, he was showing me the operations, right? Like how to, like when I build, and because I'm going to be building a sanctuary. Well, we all are. You guys are going to help me, but we're going to be building sanctuaries for people, because there will be a need for it when, oh yeah, and there's going to be a famine. So I'll go into that in another video. But, what was I going to say? So, but he was showing me, you know, safety, security. He was showing me, you know, how to house people efficiently. He was showing me, I guess, a lot of the what not to do, but he was also showing me, you know, like pointing out the things that were successful, you know, things that work. But then also I was able to experience all of the things that, like, I should not do, you know, when we opened the sanctuaries. And that was a lot of my training. So yeah, I lived here. But then during the day, by like 8 in the morning, you have to leave, right? So this is one of the shelters where, well, and I think pretty much all of them, all the homeless shelters, you can't stay. And they didn't have a day room here. Some shelters have a day room where you can go and hang out at the day room. And in San Diego, where he first trained me how to, you know, and showed me a homeless shelter for women only. This one's men and women, but the one in San Diego where I lived there for 2 days, that one had a day center where you can go hang out and stuff like that during the day, and they'd serve you 3 hot meals. But here, you know, it's a little bit more, it's kind of sucks a little bit. But, you know, they gave you like a bag breakfast to go, and then by 8 o'clock you have to be like out the door, and then you don't come back until 5 o'clock. But we would always come back half an hour early to make sure that we got a good bed. And I say we because then I made friends, and like I'd hang out with my friends and stuff like that, and we'd you know, just do this together. But anyway, on my birthday, right around my birthday, June 6th, a few days before, I had met this guy, and we'll just call him JC, okay? And you know, he came and spoke to me and just asked me a question. And it was just like, and we were wearing face masks, like, because it was still like right after the pandemic, so everyone was still wearing face masks. So I saw his eyes, and he had like these cute blue eyes, you know, like, and I thought he was handsome, but, you know, like, I wasn't looking for anything. But anyways, I met him again here on my birthday, and that day I had planned to spend the night at the Boulder Creek, you know, and sleep in a sleeping bag by myself. Like, I didn't I wanted to sleep under the stars and all this and that. And so I had planned to do that, but then it started to rain. So then I was like, oh, I don't want the creek to flood and then I drown or something stupid like that. I don't know what I was thinking. But anyways, I came back here to the shelter and I ran into JC again, and we were talking, and I told him it was my birthday. And so he was like, hey, come with me. So we came right outside where the gates were that I just showed you, and he sang happy birthday to me, and he gave me his cookies. It was like, you know, those like old-fashioned cookies, like it just he was like, I don't have anything, but you know, here's some cookies. And so we kind of, you know, just, he liked me. I could tell he liked me, but I still wasn't like in, you know, that mode to like be in a relationship. You know, I'm homeless. And but anyways, we kind of just started talking, and then I told him I didn't have a phone because I had dropped it in the toilet. And so he wanted to text with me. So then he was like, here, you know, he gave me his second phone that he had. And so I told him that, you know, hey, if you want to hang out tomorrow, you know, like we can go explore the city and stuff like that. And so he had a job, but then the job, like they were late picking him up. So he ended up just like hanging out with me, and that was June 7th. And he's actually the father of my son. Things didn't work out with him because God had other plans for that relationship to fall, and that was another lesson, another, you know, part of the journey. But anyways, him and I started hanging out, and then that day that we hung out on June 7th, that our very first like date, I guess he kept calling it a date, and I'm like, I'm not on a date with you, dude. But we went to Walmart, and then he bought a tent because I had told him I always wanted to go camping. And so he bought a tent so that we could camp during the day. Well, anyway, he buys this tent, and then we go and hang out in the tent, you know. And then that night we came back to the shelter, but then I was like, hey, do you want to leave and go camp, you know? And so we went and camped in the tent at Boulder Creek. And then 2 nights later, he ended up getting into a fight and getting kicked out. And then one of our friends, a mutual friend, she came and woke me up. It was like 9 something at night. And I had told him which bed I was sleeping in, so he knew. So he told her. She came and got me, and I got my bag and, you know, picked him up outside, and we went and camped out, and then we just started hanging out ever since. But I ended up living in a tent for about a month, like maybe 3 weeks, with him. And that was my experience, like living outside. Like I was like not coming back to the shelter because we were, you know, becoming a thing. It just ended up happening that way. And I kept praying to God, like, please remove this guy out of my life. But then God had other plans. And so I had to be obedient and like stay in that relationship, you know, for the time, because there was a purpose behind it. But anyways, that's how I started sleeping outside. So we would sleep in the tent at night, and then at 6 a.m. we would pack up, clean up the area. We didn't make a mess. We didn't like ever hang out outside of the tent when we were at a little spot, and so that no one knew, you know, that we were there, because it's illegal to camp outside here in Boulder. And so anyways, we did that for a few weeks until like we got into that abandoned house that I think I talked about in another video. But yeah, so this is the shelter, and I'm about to take us to God wants me to show you guys this rock. I know it's stupid, right? Like, it's this rock where it was the first place that here in Boulder where I was like panhandling. God really wanted to humble me, guys, and like show me, you know, like what it feels like to actually be out there on the streets, you know, asking for money. Like, we all have seen, you know, a homeless person on the corner asking for money, and we, you know, some people, you know, will help them if they can, and some people like, and I've literally have heard this from so many people. I'm in the car with them, and I always want to give money, you know, even when I was living in the world, like I always want to give money. But I would hear people make comments that, you know, like they would refer back to this one specific individual that and this story just, you know, kind of went viral, but about this guy that, you know, he would be asking for money, and then they would see him, you know, walk back to his Mercedes. And so that one tiny little story, everybody just puts like a blanket covering over all homeless people because of that one incident, you know, which is so dumb. Because how are you going to make a judgment on someone else's situation because of another person, you know, and then just like put everybody in that same category? It's so ignorant. But anyways, God wanted me to experience, you know, what it feels like, what it felt like to, you know, be out there asking for money. And so me and my friend, the girl that I was hanging out with before I met JC, we would go to this store called Lucky's Market, and we would panhandle, right? And which was so crazy because remember I told you guys I used to work here in Boulder. I was like, you know, had a very prestigious role here in Boulder, and then like, you know, lo and behold, a couple years later I ended up homeless in the city where I was a prominent person. You know, I mean, I was managing the #1 King Soopers here in Boulder, the highest volume and sales store here in Boulder, the most of all the stores of there's no Walmarts up here, but here, I'm gonna stop and show you guys real quick. I don't know if you guys could see that rock right there.